we're going to kick things off this week with a song called The Prowl. This comes from the album Amerikawna. That's Amerikawna. And it's from the band, the Kaw Tikis. That's K-A-W, and then the word Tikis. You can learn more about them at kawtikis.bandcamp.com. Check out the album Amerikawna over there, or go to their Facebook page, or go to their website, which is kawtikis.com, or go to their CD release party on Saturday, May 3rd at 4 p.m. Mountain Time at a place called, and I apologize, I don't know if it's pronounced Lucia, or Lucia. I tried to find out online, I just didn't have any luck. Whatever it is, however it's pronounced, go there at 4 p.m. on May 3rd for a CD release party. Kaw Tikis will be there, as well as the Fixers, and they're going to be playing. Kaw Tikis are playing at 8:30 p.m. Go check them out and let them know that you heard about them here on the podcast devoted to the classic and sometimes not so classic genre cinema of yesteryear. This is The Bride of Monster Kid Radio, episode 22. My name is Derek M. Cook, your writer, host, and producer, and I'm happy to have you here because we're going to dive into a movie that holds a very special place in my Monster Kid heart for a couple of different reasons. And that movie is Attack of the Giant Leeches. No, I'm serious. I'm being dead serious. This movie is very special to me. And we're going to be talking about it this week with my friend Matt Rashleigh. Now, for those of you who are just now coming to the podcast, Matt has been on the show in the past. He is a Monster Kid Radio irregular, and he is an old dear friend of mine. Somebody that I met, I think it was the mid to late 90s. Yeah, that sounds about right. In film school at Montana State University. Then life kind of did its thing, and we kind of drifted a little bit. He got involved with news journalism and became an amazing photog, and I didn't. I stayed in Montana. He went off to the Pacific Northwest, and eventually, during COVID, no less, Matt and I reconnected in Portland, Oregon, and it's been amazing to catch up with him and learn that while some circles may grow and shrink, the circles are always still going to be there when you need them the most. And Matt and I have resumed our friendship, and I'd say it's even stronger now than it was then. And not just because he's been catching up with me watching all these incredible monster movies. We're going to talk about that in this episode of the podcast. Of course, we've got Mark Matzke here as well, the Beta Capsule review. And it just occurred to me that I'm always saying, of course Mark is here. I never want it to sound like I'm taking him for granted, because I don't. I love that he is doing an episode-by-episode breakdown of every episode of the Ultraman franchise. We are in the middle, actually past the middle now. We're in the late 30s or so of the episodes of Ultraman Ace. So that's coming up in this week as well. Plus, I have a little bit of feedback that I want to touch on. We got something from Captain Billy that I'd like to comment on. And you know what? What the heck? Let's get into it right now.
Hey, Derek. Hey, Beth. Hey, group. Captain Billy here. Real quick, Penny Dreadful mentioned that cutting up episodes of Dark Shadows sounded like a terrible idea to her to make into a movie. So the first thing I thought of was this was not an uncommon practice at the time in the 60s. I know the man from Uncle. If I remember correctly, Michael Weldon in the Psychotronic Film Guide first mentioned, this is when I first became aware of these. They took episodes of Man from U.N.C.L.E. and to cut them into movies. I believe they were 6 movies altogether. Turner Classic Movies showed them, it's probably 20 years ago now. And yeah, they were cut up, according to Michael, for European distribution. I guess to show, it was either European distribution or to be shown on television in syndication. Because I guess the spy genre never got any traction once you got into the 70s, so in order to make some money on these things. But Michael Weldon, I believe, said they were for European distribution, so why the show wouldn't have been on European TV is beyond me. We took the Avengers. I don't know why they wouldn't take the Man from U.N.C.L.E. So the other instance of this happening was the Green Hornet, when Bruce Lee became a sensation. They took episodes of the Green Hornet show and chopped them up. In fact, I think it was Michael Weldon. Again, I read that. I don't remember the title of the movie. I know there was just the one, from what I understand. I remember the image of the poster is a big picture of Bruce Lee dressed as Kato And then it says it's basically Kato with the Green Hornet and very tiny print underneath it or something. Where's that second? There's images from the little freeze frames across the bottom of the image. But yeah, this big image of Bruce Lee in the Kato costume on the poster. So yeah, like I said, Dan Curtis thinking you could take episodes and chop. I mean, it is the cheapest way to create a motion picture out of it. And again, if you wanted to put this in Europe on European screens, it would, yeah, I mean, or sell it to European television to show on TV. It's a cheap way of getting the show out there and promoting it. Again, from what I have read, the 66 Batman movie, which came out in the summer of 66, was created to sell the show to Europe. They were going to put that in European theaters. If the movie took off, it would make it very easy to sell the TV show in Europe for the fall of 66. You know, I never actually followed up to see if that actually worked. I don't know how much money the movie made over there, so. Derek, you give that sweetie woman of yours a big hug from me, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you for calling in, Captain Billy. I really appreciate it. And listeners, if you want to be as cool as Captain Billy, although I don't know how that's possible, if you want to be as cool as Captain Billy, you can call in and leave us a voicemail as well at 360-524-2484, or you can even email us at monsterkidradio@gmail.com. I want to respond to what Captain Billy said. I don't know if a feature-length version of Dark Shadows chopped up would work. You know what? Actually, let me take this back. Let me walk this back a little bit. First of all, we had Penny Dreadful and Steve Turek on the show a couple weeks ago, back in episode 20, where they talked about the movie House of Dark Shadows. Penny Dreadful is also the host of the Terror at Collinwood podcast, which you can find at terror@collinwood.com. It's super great if you are into Dark Shadows a bunch or even just a little bit. Highly recommended. You know what? I'd recommend it either way because it's just a fantastically produced show, and I love it. I'm a big fan. And of course, we love Penny Dreadful here as well. And I love Dark Shadows quite a bit. So, would Dark Shadows, the original TV show, work as a feature-length film if it had been chopped up and re-released? I don't know, but I do know that in the past there have been fan productions that people have taken episodes of the original Dark Shadows and chopped them up, maybe excising some bits here and there because it was a soap opera, which is a format that is the master of the least amount of forward momentum in story narrative in the most amount of time. That's just what soaps were and kind of are still, I think. Anyway, they cut out a lot of the repeat stuff that they would throw in there for the show for people who might not have seen the last week's episode, that sort of thing, or the previous day's episode, and made like a feature-length-ish movie, fan edit, supercut. I've seen them pop up on YouTube over the years, and then I see them get taken down for copyright reasons over the years because, well, it is a copyright thing, and I totally understand why. However, I would say that this is not unheard of when it comes to genre cinema. Now, I haven't talked about Planet of the Apes on the show in a very, very long time, which is something that I'd actually like to revisit, and I have not talked to Scott Morris on the show in forever, and I always promised him that we would get back together and talk about the Planet of the Apes TV series. Yes, there was a live-action Planet of the Apes TV series, and it did get repackaged as TV movies. They would take 2 episodes, maybe 3, I'm not 100% sure because I've purposely stayed away from the TV series because I wanted to watch it fresh when I revisit the franchise with Scott. But my understanding is that they would take 2 or 3 episodes of the live-action series, drop them together, and make them a feature-length TV film. Not quite the same as a theatrical release. However, what did get a theatrical release was the 1970s live-action Spider-Man TV show. And I gotta tell you, growing up, I saw this and I loved this show. Now, granted, we didn't have what we have today when it comes to superhero content or adaptations of Spider-Man on television, but I really enjoyed this as a kid. And I still think Nicholas Hammond needs to get a cameo in a Spider-Man MCU film. If you're going to put Lou Ferrigno in one of the movies, you got to put Nicholas Hammond in one of the movies. Anyway, Nicholas Hammond played a live-action Peter Parker in this very short-lived run. It was a Spider-Man TV show, and it was 1970s technology, so But these episodes got mushed together, edited together, and released on television on CBS as a feature-length film, but overseas, they got a theatrical release. In fact, I think Japan, they got a really big push. And I've seen a one-sheet for a Japanese release of one of these Spider-Man movies, and it looks super cool. I'll never own one. I think it's outside of my budget for that sort of thing, but boy, it looks really cool. So maybe it would work, with some judicious, I just make up a word, judicious editing. Maybe it would work out. I don't know. Either way, I love the idea of kind of just imagining like a massive fan edit of putting all this stuff together. I don't think it's a project that I want to take on at all. I don't have the time. But, if another one of those Dark Shadows fan edits turns up somewhere, I'd certainly give it a look. Captain Billy, thank you for calling in. I appreciate you, man. I appreciate all of your support of the show by calling in all the time. Love having you here as part of the Bride of Monster Kid Radio community. Listeners, I'd like to know what you think of the idea of taking these genre television properties and repackaging them, combining them, making a massive fan edit of them, and then releasing them as a movie, as a feature-length film. Let me know. Contact information, already went over it once. It's over at the website. Check it out at monsterkidradio.net. Okay, I think the Kaw Tikis need a break, so let's go ahead and get into the rest of the show right now.
The world's favorite comic book hero, followed by 84 million readers a year. Now, he comes alive. For the first time on the screen, you'll see it all. The spectacular adventures of the amazing Spider-Man.
He can do the things a spider does, climb walls and spin webs, and he's very, very strong.
You've heard about him. You've read about him. Now, you'll see him in action.
Kill him.
No challenge is too great. No enemy is too strong. The most popular, most daring, most exciting superhero in the entire world. At last, he comes alive for his most incredible adventure. Now, Spider-Man takes on a madman who's turning the streets into a siege of terror. More and more people are being mysteriously hypnotized into threatening the entire city and destroying themselves. Look up high as one man does the impossible. He uses all his fantastic spider powers to battle the most evil forces ever imagined. Astounding live-action excitement. The super adventure of everybody's favorite superhero. Spider-Man. Now, he lives.
Tonight, a man's dream of flying leads to danger when his glider falls into the wrong hands on Farewell to the Planet of the Apes.
With Luric's wings, we can swoop down out of the night sky in the dark, unseen, unheard. That is why I'm determined to keep him alive until he can teach us to fly.
It's Man Against Beast, Ape Week. Don't miss Farewell to the Planet of the Apes, tonight at 8 on Channel 48.
Live from the Land of Light in Nebula M78, home of the mighty Ultra Heroes, it's Monster Kid Radio's Beta Capsule Review. Ultraman Ace, Episode 36, A Terrible Monster Registering 10,000 Phones? Hokuto and Mikawa encounter a motorcycle gang while investigating terrible monster sightings, and it's not a pleasant exchange. When the same group harasses Danumezu and his sister, Hokuto intervenes, trying, at first, to win over the bikers with kindness. But when that doesn't work, he gets into a fistfight with them and lands in hot water with Captain Ryu. Meanwhile, terrible monster Soundgiller continues its appearances, which are getting longer each time. Inspired by Hokuto's valor in defending school kids from Soundgiller, one of the bikers rushes to help. And soon, the biker gang begins acting like big brothers and sisters to the kids from Hikari Elementary. When Soundgiller's next rampage threatens their school, the bikers join forces with Tak. But the terrible monster sets Hokuto on fire. Is it too late for him to transform into Ace? Episode 36 of Ultraman Ace, broadcast on December 8, 1972, skews toward a slightly older crowd than the past number of episodes, focusing on a motorcycle gang made up of older teens. It makes for an engaging story as Hokuto tries to appeal to the better nature of the rebel riders, explaining to Mikawa that he could have easily ended up like them. This could have been an even better episode if Soundgiller had looked a little scarier, but the battle sequence is greatly enhanced by an extended version of the Ultraman Ace theme song, with a new verse that proclaims, "Hokuto's bravery tears the enemy apart." Episode 36 is an acknowledgement of the rise of the universal Japanese motorcycle, vehicles produced by Honda, Kawasaki, and others, known for reliability, performance, and affordable pricing, their international success a source of cultural pride for Japanese manufacturers. For Monster Kid Radio's Beta Capsule Review, this is Mark Matzke reporting.
Coming soon, this June, it's the Monster Bash Conference at the Pittsburgh Marriott North in Cranberry Township. Fans of classic horror and science fiction films and TV will gather from across the United States and beyond. It's where you can meet and get autographs from movie and TV actors and actresses. This June 20th through the 22nd, 2025, meet Catherine Lee Scott and Sharon Smythe from the original Dark Shadows TV show, plus writer and zombie from the original Night of the Living Dead, John Russo, and the kids and grandkids of the original Universal Monsters, Frankenstein, creature from the Black Lagoon, Dracula, the Wolfman, and the Mummy, Ron Chaney, Lynn Lugosi, Renee Browning. Also appearing, the Monsters movie grandpa Daniel Roebuck, TV horror host Son of Ghoul, an Ohio TV legend, and horror host Mr. Lobo. Renegade monster movie director David The Rock Nelson will be filming on site as well. You'll love shopping over 100 vendor tables featuring movie collectibles, DVDs, Blu-rays, vintage toys, vinyl records, monster magazines, comic books, and more to boggle your eyes. Rare film screenings, special talks, and live game shows where you can win great prizes. It's all part of Monster Bash at the Pittsburgh Marriott North, June 20th through the 22nd, 2025. For discounted advance admission, go to the website monsterbash.us. That's monsterbash.us. Or call 724-238-4317 for more information.
We love the Monster Bash! Woo!
John Cocorn was the first man to be set up in a satellite and ejected back to Earth.
Something's wrong. I'm falling too fast. Golden Rod, I'm in trouble. The jets aren't breaking my speed. I'm releasing the drag chute.
"7 hours and his blood is still alive.
Night of the Blood Beast brings you the first creature on Earth bullets cannot kill.
This is fantastic. It's unbelievable. Things like this just don't happen.
A blood beast that makes a dead man live.
Dr. Wyman, half his head's gone.
A blood beast that feasts on Earth scientists. The first satellite creature to impregnate man with its chromosomes.
It's true. I can feel it inside.
The first exploration into living space, exposing secrets too horrifying to reveal. You'll know days of nerve-straining suspense.
Have something to share with Bride of Monster Kid Radio? You can email the show at monsterkidradio@gmail.com, or you can call and leave a voicemail at 360-524-2484.
Watch out for them! A menace never known to man or beast before. An endless horde of crawling, crushing, gigantic creatures. So horrifying there was no word to describe them.
Watch out for them! Watch out for Warner Brothers' screaming new shock sensation, them!
Yes, I saw them. They were huge and scaly, and they had gigantic jaws, and then one came at me.
Kill one and two take its place. This is the endless onslaught of them, clawing up out of the earth from mile-deep catacombs.
See them, the most astounding journey into terror ever taken, starring James Whitmore, Edmund Gwenn, Joan Weldon, and James Arness. Them!
Once a normal, voluptuously beautiful woman, she drove into a nightmare of horror and saw descending from the sky a titanic monster whose fearsome touch became a frightful curse.
You think I'm drunk, don't you? All of you! I'm not drunk! I'm not! You've got to believe me.
Please.
It was right in the middle of the highway, 30 feet tall.
Once she's in the booby hatch, throw the key away. That'll put you in the driver's seat. You'd make a wild driver, Harry. With $50 million.
What she saw was beyond belief until others, too, faced its hideous, uncontrollable menace. Attack of the 50-foot woman, incredibly huge, with incredible desires for love and vengeance.
This is Count Dracula, and I'm here to offer you a friendly warning. Derek and his guests often get excited, and occasionally this results in revealing key plot points of the movies they're discussing. You know how the children of the night, monster kids, can get sometimes. So consider yourself warned. And don't come begging to me to kill them for their transgressions afterward. I have more pressing issues to take care of, like that pesky Van Helsing.
All right, let's do it.
All
Clear my throat one last time.
right.
I got a giant leech stuck in there. Hold on.
And that's how I'm going to start this. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about Attack of the Giant Leeches. He's become quite the Bride of Monster Kid Radio irregular. Matt Rashleigh back on the show, and we're going to dive into this 1959 film that has a very special place in my heart, and I can get into that here in a little bit. Matt, how are you, man?
I'm good. I've enjoyed a few more creature features, and I'm excited to talk about this one.
You have been on a tear, and I love this. Ladies and gentlemen, if this is not an opportunity for me to pimp the Facebook page and group, I don't know what it is. Matt has been watching a lot of these movies, and he doesn't just go onto Facebook and say, hey, I'm watching this flick. He usually writes up like a little paragraph or capsule review of the film, and I love it. I absolutely love that Matt is diving into these movies that I love so much. My history with Matt is that I met him in film school, and while I think he knew that I liked classic monster movies at the time, I don't think I even realized the depth to which I loved them. So I feel like in a weird way, without really meaning to, Matt's been catching up with Derek's cinema online, just going through all these movies, and I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, a reborn monster kid here. It's been a lot of fun.
And whenever he picks one that he talks about and clearly loves it, it's like, well, there's fodder for a show. So let's do Attack of the Giant Leeches. And you had not seen this before, is that right?
No, I mean, I'd seen clips of it and, different videos kind of putting it on the long list of low budget movies that kind of get made fun of. But no, I'd never sat down and watched the whole thing.
This is in the public domain, so it was fodder for Mystery Science Theater 3000, and several horror hosts have covered it. I'm not going to try to name all of them that have, but I do know specifically Penny Dreadful did cover this or present this as part of her Shilling Shockers program. And I mentioned that because Penny Dreadful was just on the show a couple of weeks ago talking about House of Dark Shadows with Steve Turek, and we love Penny here, so I wanted to give her a shout out. But I'm sure it's also been covered by all of our other favorite horror hosts as well, whether that be Dr. Gang Green, Marlena Midnight, any of them really, Lord Bloodraw, Mr. Lobo, and I know I just said I wasn't going to try to mention them all, but here I am doing it. I'm going to stop because I'm sure I'm going to forget one. But yeah, this movie gets played a lot is what I'm getting at. And it's available on YouTube for free. Doesn't stop some companies from charging a $1 or $2 to watch it, but still it's available for free if you know where to look. And that's how I watched it this time. How did you watch it?
I have access to Canopy, which is a streaming service provided by public libraries. So it's free if you have your library card. And they had a copy that they were claiming was a newly remastered version of it. And it looked really clean. I was impressed.
Really? Okay, I was going to ask you about that. I know that it did recently have was it a Blu-ray release? I think it was a Blu-ray release by Filmmakers on Blu-ray, complete with a commentary track, as well as some interviews and things along those lines. It was released with A Night of the Blood Beast on Blu-ray as a double feature. I have that, but it's in storage. So I had to rely on a YouTube version, which made me realize I really wish I had spent some time in storage to dig it out, because the YouTube transfer I saw was kind of dark and murky. Not that the movie is very brightly lit to begin with, but I would have liked to have seen a little bit more detail of the Leeches and Yvette Vickers.
It does seem to be, like you said, it is in the public domain. It seems like a lot of streaming services have it for free. It's easily accessible. It's also part of the reason I think this movie, a lot of people know of it, is that it's been released on DVD at the dollar store and different B-movie monster collections. It's been out there and all over the place. So it's an easy movie to track down. I know a lot of people have made fun of this movie, but when I watched it, I thought it was something really special. And I thought it was one of those that deserves a little bit more credit for just being a good film.
What strikes you about this movie that makes it special, to use your words there? What is special about it for you?
For me, it's like a recipe, It just has the perfect combination of elements that really worked for me. I know a lot of people were, like, the one line that I commonly found on online reviews was rednecks versus trash bags in the swamp. It was sort of the gist that I was picking up when I was, looking at what other people thought of this movie. And when I saw it, I was like, I think it's better than that. It feels a little bit like the way it begins. It's like right out of the gate. Like, there's no pretense, there's no setup. Right away, you're with a guy who's in the Everglades dealing with a creature he can't put down with several shots of buckshot from his shotgun, like right out of the gate. And I was like, oh, that's a great beginning. And then when you see the cast of supporting characters, like, they all have distinct looks. It feels like it could have been a cast out of a Coen's brother movie, And it feels like, to me, like a Twilight Zone episode. You're dropped into this world. And the world is true to itself. And I didn't think that any of the swamp people were overly drawn stereotypes or really crude. They all seemed like people living their lives. And so right away I was drawn in. I was like, oh, this is going to be interesting.
That's kind of how I feel about it now. The first time I saw this movie, I was like, oh, cool. New monsters that I've never experienced before, right? These are giant leeches. I've never seen a giant leech in a monster movie. The first time I saw this, I was almost strictly Universal and some Hammer, and that's all I knew when it came to classic monsters. I think I might have known of Teenage Werewolf and Teenage Frankenstein at that point, but my knowledge was pretty limited. This movie, I mentioned there's a couple different reasons why it's special to me. was given to me on a VHS tape, probably by Good Times or Rhino Home Video, as a Christmas gift from my old buddy Jared, way back in the day when I lived in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I don't think I've mentioned Jared lately anywhere, but Jared is somebody that I went to school with in Cheyenne. He was a year behind me, met him in junior high school, and then we became really close in high school, one of my best friends. And he's the guy that kind of planted the seed in me about wanting to be a movie maker. He was the one that introduced me to the idea that we could make our own movies at home with our video cameras, and we did. We formed a quote-unquote video production company called Duo Caneto Productions and made our own little movies with our friends in our backyard, and then would go on and took the video production courses at the community college over and over and over again, and continued to make movies separately and together. And that was a very special time for me and really kind of formulated a lot of who I was and am as a creative. And when Jared gave this to me for Christmas, first I was a little underwhelmed because I'm like, what is this? This looks cheap. And it didn't weigh very much either because it was obviously recorded in EP or SLP mode or produced in that speed. So very little videotape was actually spent on the production of this VHS tape. But when I watched it, it really opened my eyes to Corman, AIP, in a way that Teenage Frankenstein and Werewolf did not open my eyes to AIP. It really introduced me to this other low-budget monster movie making that was happening around the same time some of my favorite Universal monster movies, like Creature from the Black Lagoon and those, were happening. And so this really became kind of a weird gateway for me into the very low-budget monster movies of the era. And it did feel special to me at the time because of the monsters. But over the years, I find myself, and I feel like I'm kind of hoarding the conversation here, and I don't mean to, but over the years, as I watch monster movies, whether it's this one, whether it's the Universals or the Hammers, or even a modern day creature feature. Beth and I just saw a creature feature in the movie theater the other day. The monsters are cool, but I don't know if it's because I'm getting older or my tastes are shifting a little bit. I find myself drawn more to the people stuff. I find myself drawn more to the, for lack of a better term, victims or the people experiencing what's happening around the monsters. And so when I watched Attack of the Giant Leeches, specifically for this conversation, I just watched it this morning over breakfast and coffee, I really found myself kind of paying very close attention to the idea of an outsider working in a very tight-knit community that has their own ways, this kind of sub-community, and trying to navigate his way around what's supposed to be done, how we're supposed to deal with these things, and then the people in this sub-community, the swamp people, for lack of a better term, and their relationships and why they're doing the things that they're doing, and of that Vickers character's story and why she's with this person that she clearly has no feelings for, but she's married to him, and how she ended up there and what she's doing to try to find her own form of happiness, whether it hurts her husband or not. And this whole relationship thing, I was really drawn toward that. And then, of course, I also really am going to go back to the outsider coming in. A lot of times when we watch monster movies, we're like, well, the monster is the outsider, and that's our connection as outsiders, as freaks, as geeks, as nerds, as fans, as monster kids. And that happens, sure, with Frankenstein's monster or the Gill Man or whatever. But in this case, I found myself drawn toward Ken Clark, which is weird because I look nothing like him at all. But I love Ken Clark, and I can talk about Ken Clark more later. But like I said, I've been bogarting a lot of the conversation. I want to give Matt a chance to talk.
No, I agree with you. I think that that's what surprised me was that in a lot of ways, the human characters were more complex and interesting than a lot of other 1950s, 60s sci-fi horror movies. And I think that caught me by surprise because the fact that you did have like these parallels, like Attack of the Giant Leeches, 1959, like you said, like you have different parts of society and culture going on. You have these people that live in the swamp of the Everglades who fish and poach and hunt gators, that all of a sudden their world gets upended by these giant leeches that are in the water. And now the gators are gone and people are disappearing. And that's a whole other level of tension. And the fact that you start out with, Liz Baby, Yvette Vickers' character, who's married to Dave, played by Bruno Vasoda, as the store owner, classic small town store owner, knows everybody, very friendly, finds a way to be able to help them get what they need. And the fact that he's totally taken advantage of by his wife. And both of them are great. Like, they're both great in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yvette Vickers, this is kind of early in her acting career. She was also one of the very first playmates for Playboy magazine.
Mm-hmm.
Just after this movie came out, as I was doing research, I found out that Stephen King saw this movie in the theater as a kid and had a boyhood crush on her for years following it. So there's that. And then Bruno Vasoda, like, he just tears your heart out. Like, you totally care about his character of Dave and his struggles of being teased by his group of so-called friends and dealing with his wife who's less than loyal to him.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought all that was really compelling and was more dramatic than what I expected in a Corman picture, especially a low budget Corman picture that was shot in 8 days for $70,000.
I was about to say that. And they did all this in 8 days. Who knows how long they spent on the script? Probably not that long.
Well, and the fact that, like, Gene Corman ended up in the hospital with this production. He ended up with pneumonia because it was such a low budget affair. The director and his brother were the ones pulling the boat in and out of the water because they were shooting in California, even though it doubles for Florida. And when Gene heard about that and knowing how much other work they had to do, he decided that he'd volunteer for getting the boat in and out of the water. And he ended up getting pneumonia and ended up in the hospital. So there was some sacrifice made there.
It really was. And when you read about these things, it feels like a guerrilla production, a real low budget guerrilla production, not unlike the kind of stuff you and I might have tried to do 20 years ago when we were 20 years younger. It really feels like the kind of thing I would have tried to have done in terms of the kind of movies that I was interested in making back then. And that's another reason why this movie speaks so much to me, is it feels like everybody was all hands on deck. The cameraman won't go in the water. I'll do it. Doesn't matter what's going to happen to me. Well, one hospital visit later,
Right. And the fact that, like, it was done on a shoestring, Roger and Gene wanted Paul Blaisdell to design the Giant Leeches. And Paul, who was a genius unto himself with his wife Jackie, made all kinds of creatures. And aliens and monsters for next to no money with next to no time. But on this, he was like, no, that's not enough money for me or enough time. So I can't do it. And even with that said, Gene's wife, Nan Corman, with actor Ed Nelson, designed and built the Giant Leeches. And it's amazing. Like, I don't think that it would work well in color, but for me, the Giant Leeches look great in black and white.
Yeah.
And the sound effects that they have, like, it makes a really scary creature that for me holds up. I know that a lot of people are like, oh, they're Glad trash bags with paper plates stuck to them, but I don't think that's what they are. And for me, I bought into the fact that these were swamp monsters.
I agree with you 100%. There is a colorized version of this available on YouTube. I have never watched it. I don't want to. I feel like this movie would be dealt a disservice if it was colorized, because part of the reason why this culture, this group of people that live in the swamp, works for me is because it feels gritty and real, and that works in black and white for me. I don't want to see it colorized. Sure, maybe it'd be great to see Yvette Vickers in full color, but there are magazines there I can go find that in, I'm sure, but I want it to be black and white. It feels more real and grounded to me that way.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I think the monsters look okay. I don't have a problem with them at all. I know I made a crack earlier about how this movie does seem a little dark, a little murky, and maybe it could be improved with a little bit more lighting, but I don't need much more, I suppose. I think the monsters work. The sound is there. What more do you need?
Especially when they're in the water and moving around, that's when they're at their best.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple times where in their underwater lair, their cave, where they do look like guys in suits in the way that they're moving.
Mm-hmm.
But like, that's the only time that it really was noticeable to me. You know, the characters, the story, the music, everything had me in for the ride.
It's interesting you said the music too, because this was all stock music from the AIP library. Right? This wasn't like original score created by so-and-so. This was cobbled together with what they had access to, but they made it work.
Yeah, Alexander Laszlo, who did tons of music for AIP,
Yeah.
did this.
I really wish there was like a master AIP soundtrack collection release, because you'd cover like 20 movies with one disc. But I love it. You know, I know a lot of it's like Ronald Stein stuff and things like that, and I have a lot of that, but a lot of this library stuff in the AIP collection, I love it. I listen to film scores all day anyway, and I would just like to add it to the mix. As far as some of the other special effects go, I hadn't watched this in a long time. So I was kind of shocked, pleasantly. The corpses looked really good. The bodies coming up from the bottom of the water after they blow up the dynamite, I was really pleased with that. If that's where their money went for their makeup, bravo, sirs and gentlemen and ladies and whoever else worked on it. I thought the bodies looked good. We had some blood as well, and I really liked that too. That sounds really weird over context, but you know what I mean.
And on that point, I was so surprised that, you know, in the underwater cave, when the leeches are feeding on the still alive victims, it was way more horrifying than I expected. And I think it works better in black and white for that reason. You know, it wasn't some kind of Technicolor red paint. It looks gruesome like blood. And I was really surprised that it was as graphic and as scary as it was for 1959. And that was another thing that surprised me.
I think because it was such a low budget production, it wasn't on a lot of people's radars while they were making it. And AIP probably didn't even care. So yeah, go gruesome if you have to, or if you can. Nobody's there to tell them no. Who are they going to pay to sit around set and tell them no? They don't have the money for that. So yeah, I really like the bodies and the feeding scenes with the sounds and the actors and actresses screaming, and everybody was on board. Nobody looks like they're phoning it in. Everybody is completely buying the reality of the situation. Even when they could have gone super broad and played up a stereotype like Bruno is Dave, the store owner, could have played it up kind of goofy. Oh, he's the big, overweight guy running the store. Ha ha, doesn't know his wife's cheating on him. They really could have played that up, but they didn't. They kept it all grounded, and I think that sells the reality of the overall picture.
Yeah, and it kind of reminded me of a lot of Westerns in a way, in the sense of it being, you know, a small community set aside. And the fact that you had all these character actors filling in all the parts. Like Gene Roth as the sheriff is great. Like he strikes you as that small town sheriff that does the law his own way and doesn't believe anything that he doesn't think of himself. And like the rest of the cast, almost everybody in this had huge careers in the sense of being in television shows. As I was looking up person after person, like they all have 100, 200 screen credits on IMDb. And a lot of them were like one-offs or two-offs, like Bonanza or that kind of thing. So it's really interesting, the cast of characters that end up in this movie. We talked about Yvette Vickers. We talked about Bruno Visoda a little bit. He had an interesting career in himself. Like he started out in Chicago doing plays, ended up on radio, came to LA, and he just ended up being like that extra day player in so many television shows, everything from Bonanza to Kojak to Hogan's Heroes. And he even directed 3 movies for AIP, The Brain Eaters, Female Jungle, and I don't have the other title in front of me. But he had an interesting career. And I was mentioning the sheriff, Gene Roth. He had over 280 film credits on IMDb. He started out as a manager of movie theaters in New York.
Okay.
Came to LA on a tour. And as he was touring a set, they were shooting a movie with, from what I've read, they were shooting a movie that had Nazis in it. And some of the people on the crew were like, hey, that guy looks like a Nazi. Maybe he'd be an extra. And they put him in a Nazi uniform. And they're like, oh yeah, he's in. And after that, he ended up playing he ended up playing Nazis to start his acting career. But after that, he did a ton of Westerns, other B movies. He was also an expert machinist, so he was probably pretty handy to have on set when things didn't work right. It's just interesting that the cast of characters that were around this movie, they went on to other things. Michael Emmett plays Cal, who's sort of the love interest of Yvette Vickers, who's a total scumbag and totally misuses his friend Dave. He's also done a lot of TV, also in Night of the Blood Beast, which I think we have someone else in the... Tyler McVeigh, who played Doc, also in Night of the Blood Beast. So we had a couple of different actors who reappear in other things that were Corman related.
Right.
I do feel like the supporting cast is way better than the big three of this one for myself. Ken Clark's good, but I feel like he's pretty wooden in this one, more than he is later in his career. Tyler McVeigh is Doc, also 200 credits, acting credits, everything from Lassie to Highway to Heaven. And then Jan Shepard, who also did Rawhide and Bonanza and a bunch of other TV.
Right.
So it's a really talented cast, even though it's a micro budget kind of shoot on the fly flick. So that alone is kind of impressive.
Well, and the director himself, many more television credits than film credits to his name. Bernard L. Kowalski did a lot of TV, which, especially back then in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, very fast productions. You got a few days to shoot an episode and then get it going. You don't have a lot of time. So, maybe working on this film would help serve him in his television career or vice versa. Who knows? But he also directed Night of the Blood Beast.
As you're saying that, it does kind of make me think that maybe this is the earlier version of the School of Corman. That if you could bang out a movie in 8 days for $70,000, you could do episodic television because you knew how to work on a tight schedule and budget and still get something to air. Something I hadn't really thought about until you were mentioning it now.
I'm looking at his television career, and a lot of it's Westerns, but of course a lot of it was Westerns back then. But he did a lot of the anthology shows. Oh, he did some episodes of The Untouchables, which is pretty cool. And just a number of other projects that I'm very interested in. Not a lot of genre stuff, but you take the work you can get. Night of the Blood Beast is an interesting flick. I think I like this one better. Maybe that's something you and I can talk about in the future if you're interested.
I haven't seen Blood Beast.
Night of the Blood Beast it's good. But like I said, I like this one better. So, but yeah, lots of television Western people in this. Hey, that guy looks like a Nazi is probably something you never want to have anybody say about you unless you're in Hollywood potentially looking for work. And then...
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, and speaking of Westerns and all these different actors, like the screenplay you'd mentioned earlier was written by Leo Gordon, who was a supporting actor in tons of Westerns and TV shows. And he was the one who wrote the screenplay, which is also kind of interesting.
Part of that blossoming Corman group of people, right? Mm-hmm. You get this group that all hands on deck. We don't have a part for you this time, but you're going to write it, whatever it takes. And I love that. Although I'm going to take umbrage with you about Ken Clark, man.
Oh, yeah? You think he holds up well in this movie?
I think he's okay in this movie, actually. I'm drawn to Ken Clark because I love him in the Euro spy films that I've seen.
Sure.
I love him as an actor, as Agent Dick Malloy in Special Mission Lady Chaplin, From the Orient with Fury, and Mission Bloody Mary. He plays a special agent, CIA, I believe. I think they say it's CIA. He's an American. And he goes on these missions to stop evildoers and, meet lovely, beautiful women and have all sorts of romps and escapades across the world. And I love it. The Eurospy genre is something that I didn't discover until I started working with Dorado Films, which I'm not with anymore and haven't been in quite some time. But when I was working with Dorado Films, they owned the rights to hundreds, if not thousands of films from Europe. Spaghetti westerns, giallo, various thrillers, some comedies, some Macaroni combat films, and a lot of Euro spy films. And working there, I discovered my love for Euro spy films and deepened my love for spaghetti westerns and realized spaghetti westerns is a much bigger genre than I ever realized. I always thought it was, Clint Eastwood and Django, and that was about it. I didn't realize it was so deep. And I love that. And if I wasn't already producing this podcast, I'd probably launch a spaghetti Western podcast because I love him so much. Or maybe a Eurospy podcast. I don't know, because I love those too. But yeah, Ken Clark, I feel like, is such a classic looking hero. I think he does a really good job as the secret agent in these Eurospy films. And in this one, he really does feel like the outsider to me. I mean, he's supposed to be, you know, he's the guy from the big city who does things a particular way. He works with the government. You know, he stands by his morals, his job. You know, his girlfriend's, is it girlfriend or wife? His girlfriend's father is threatening to use dynamite. And he's like, well, I'm going to arrest you if you do. And, you know, he does, and it works, and he still arrests him anyway. And I like that kind of stoic hero-ness of him in this.
He definitely has that look of like a classic leading man hero. I just felt like in this movie, his delivery was kind of wooden. But I do totally get the idea of him being an outsider, and maybe that plays better in the sense that he is sort of stoic and stiff, and being a state game ranger versus all these yokels and locals who are telling him the way it is, even though he knows better. Does really work well. I just think that, like, I think he loosens up and becomes a better actor as his career goes on. He looks good here. I just don't know about his performance overall for me.
No, that's fair. That's fair. You know, the way his career went is he ended up doing a lot in Italy, which a lot of American actors ended up doing. If for whatever reason, and I know this is going to sound judgmental and it's not meant to, because I have nothing but respect for people like Ken Clark and Roger Brown, rest in peace, and a number of other folks. They didn't make it big over here for whatever reason, but they became leading men in Italy and had quite the career over there. And he's one of them. I mean, he did a number of other films over there too. He did a number of spaghetti Westerns. I don't buy him as a cowboy as much, which is weird because you're saying he feels wooden in this, and maybe this Ken Clark would have been a better spaghetti Western cowboy.
Interesting.
Because he is kind of wooden and stiff, and I'm not casting judgment on spaghetti Western actors, but he feels more of that mold in this one. He does loosen up a little bit more when he gets put on a tux.
Yeah.
As opposed to running around without a top and, you know, showing off his hairy chest, which would have put him right at home in a Creature from the Black Lagoon film, really.
Yeah, I did have a laugh at that moment when they came to his door and there he was, shirtless and casual, talking about the swamps. All very hot and steamy.
Yes. There is a little bit of tension here. A little bit, anyway, I don't know what I'm saying. Anyway, Yvette Vickers, of course, is known for another one of our favorite genre films, Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, which came out the year before this, where she plays Honey Parker, who is also kind of a floozy-like character in that as well. I don't know if she was typecast per se, but you know, she played that role well.
Yeah, for sure. It seems like, you know, Giant Leeches is sort of an exploitation film in a lot of ways, but it lands all the stops, you know, like it comes across really, really well. But yes,
it does.
Between the monsters, the blood, the very attractive Yvette Vickers, and Jan Shepard, it plays on all those notes, but it hits them just right.
I want to go back to Yvette Vickers a little bit more because I was really taken by her characterization in this time around.
Yeah.
It's been years since I've watched this. As much as this was such an instrumental part of my film education when I finally saw it on VHS all those years ago, would have been like early 90s, probably. Early to mid 90s. Yeah, that sounds about right. Anyway, it'd been years since I've seen this. So when I watched it this time, and maybe having a little bit more life experience and all that, I was really torn by her circumstance, the character's circumstance. I had an abusive husband, and the first guy who told me he loved me, I ended up going with, and, you know, at least having the awareness that that's why she went with him, as opposed to I was using him for his money, or I was using him for this, or using him for that. At least she had the awareness that what she was doing was not really truthful and honest. She was still willing to hurt him and do what she did instead of trying to get a divorce or whatever, or leave him or do something proper. But I was still so torn by her character's circumstance and moved by her performance in that.
Yeah, spot on. I definitely picked that up. I think that's one reason I think that this movie is better dramatically than a lot, was the fact that you had that she was with Michael Emmett, who was Cal, and he was talking all sorts of disparaging, awful things about her husband. And even though she isn't romantically interested in her husband, she stands up for him, saying, you don't understand. You don't understand, Dave. He took me in when no one else would. And that complexity and her performance was great. Like that triangle between Michael Emmett, Bruno Vasoda, and Yvette Vickers, like that could have been a movie unto itself that would have been good. But then on top of it, you get the giant leeches.
Yeah.
It's like an exclamation point. It's like frosting on that cake. It was great.
Yeah. Oh, man. So this movie was remade. I've never seen the remake, but it was remade, directed by Brett Kelly, whose films I am familiar with. I believe he directed a zombie movie or two that I covered on my previous, during my previous life as a podcaster over on Mail Order Zombie many, many moons ago. But I've never seen the remake. Have you seen or heard anything about the remake?
I've heard of the remake and I've heard that it's awful, but I have not seen it, so I reserve judgment. I also saw that someone did a stage play of Attack of the Giant Leeches in 2020. Do you know anything about that?
I was going to ask you the same thing because I love the idea of this being performed on stage, especially if it means we get more of the Liz Dave thing.
Oh, absolutely.
I would love more of that.
Anybody out there have a recording of that stage play or was a part of it? We'd love to know more.
It happened at the Village Theater in Atlanta, Georgia in 2020. I don't know if it exists online. I haven't bothered looking. I know that some other public domain films, notoriously Manos the Hands of Fate, have been turned into stage productions. I'm curious as to whether or not Attack of the Giant Leeches was done serious as a stage production or if they played up the jokey of it.
Yeah.
I almost would want to see it done as seriously, though. If I were to adapt it, I would want to see it done as a serious horror story with these character moments. I think that's how it would work best.
I'd buy that ticket. I'd watch that show for sure.
All right, so this is where Matt and I are going to announce a Kickstarter to raise funds for the upcoming production of I'm kidding. We're not.
I don't know. We both know actors. They might be up for it.
Oh, man, there's so many great public domain films that would make incredible stage productions, and I think this is one of them. You've got limited locations, which is something you need for the stage production, right? You have swamp, you have a couple of interiors. What more do you need? Do it. Somebody make this happen. I want to see it. I want to cover it here on the show.
Amen. Let's take it to the swamp.
Take it to the swamp. I like it. Would you keep the original title? Or would you use one of the titles that was released under overseas, like Demons of the Swamp?
Oh, Demons of the Swamp sounds good. But there's something about Attack of the Giant Leeches. One thing I was thinking about after watching this is like, how many movies have Attack in the title? I couldn't get a definitive answer from the Google device, but there's a lot of them. And I don't know, those are weighted words. Something comes with that, a mental image of Attack of the Giant Leeches. So I think I'd probably stick with the original title, but Demons of the Swamp's pretty sweet. Go either way, I guess.
Demons of the Swamp is really good. If I called it Demons of the Swamp, I'd probably want to modernize it a little bit more just because Demons feels more, I don't know, like a modern horror thing. The pragmatic, maybe cynical part of me, when I see a title like Attack of the Giant Leeches and think about all the other monster movies and low-budget movies that start with the word attack, make me think, yeah, it's a great word. Its weight carries a lot of implied meaning, but it's also the first letter in the alphabet. So when it's listed in a film directory, when people are trying to pick what movies they're going to show, it's front and center as opposed to something that starts with the letter L or M or anything else. So it's right there. It's the old thing where if you're starting a new business, start it with a number or the letter A. So it's in the front of the phone book. That doesn't matter anymore these days, but when phone books were a thing.
Yeah.
So it makes me wonder about that too. But I've also seen movie posters where it's just called The Giant Leeches, which I suppose works as well.
I mean, that's what you're going for. Is that's the title. That's what's in there.
Yeah.
I think they did a really good job of making very standard locations in the LA area look like Florida. I was kind of surprised by that. A lot of other movies and shows don't do it as effectively as they did here, and I don't know if that was by plan or just by the rushed nature of the production, but that surprised me as well.
Yeah,
I bought it.
I bought it 100%. I didn't think it was shot in a backlot somewhere. Whatever it is they did, and maybe it's because it's not very well lit, or at least the version I saw of it's not very well lit on the transfer. I never once thought this is just in somebody's backyard in California.
Yeah.
You know, I bought it 100%. And maybe it's because of the sound as well. You know, you've got the sounds of the swamp.
Right.
And when they run out of stock sound effects, suddenly the leeches have scared all the crocodiles away. So it's okay that it's quiet. But still.
It's an excuse that worked for me. I did think that nearly near the end of the film, it's like 3/4 of the way through the film, this gets hooked into the giant 50s creature idea of it being caused by radiation or man's science causing these things to happen. It's briefly mentioned that maybe it's fallout from Cape Canaveral from all the rocket launches that caused these leeches to mutate and to turn into something else.
Mm-hmm.
It's not all that important. I don't think it's one of those movies that hinges or hangs upon that idea or premise of man playing with atoms causing monsters really is effective or needed in this movie. So there is that. I looked right past that. You get a pretty classic finale to the movie with a big explosion. I wish the ending was a little more climatic. I wish there were more fights with the giant leeches. But overall, I think it's a great movie. And don't let people talking about swamp folks versus raincoats stop you from checking out the giant leeches.
I'm going to disagree with you about the ending. I think when I first saw this back in the day, yeah, I wanted a bigger fight. But now when I watch it as a story about an outsider coming into a closed community, at the end, Ken Clark's character is the one that uses the dynamite. He pushes the plunger down. Not only is he the one that does it, he's told that he has to do it. I'm not going to do your dirty work for you. You blow up the dynamite. And in a way, is that him being accepted by the swamp community now because he's the one that's been invited to pull the trigger. And to me, that felt like an acceptance, and that was a very satisfying ending for me.
That's a great take. I didn't think of it like that. I'm going to have to watch it again now. You got me hooked.
Oh, darn.
I'll have to watch it again and think more about Steve, played by Ken Clark. Like, that's a great observation.
But I really like the movie too. I really enjoy it. And like I said at the top of this, I get such a kick out of the fact when you post something on Facebook about how I just watched this movie or I just watched that movie, and then you put the little capsule review and it's like, yes, Matt gets it. No wonder he and I are so close. No wonder we've become lifelong friends. He gets it. He gets me.
Oh, and
I'm not Ken Clark anymore. Now I'm Porky or Dave or whoever. I don't know.
I love it. And I love that this is a thing that we both can explore and enjoy. Because like every one of these movies to me is like an adventure and a trip of discovery, you know, especially if it's one that I really like or I find unique in an interesting way, even if it isn't a great movie. And just going on the deep dive into the backstory of the people who made it possible, who got it done. And then sharing my enthusiasm and excitement for it with you, obviously someone who gets it and has probably seen a lot of these movies that I haven't. So for me, it's a new day. And I'm glad that for you, it's a chance to, you know, relive or rediscover some of these motion pictures.
Oh yeah. I was thrilled to watch it again this morning over breakfast, you know, sitting there at the dining room table, my cup of coffee, Wednesday sitting to the side of me, snoring. And I'm just having a grand time watching this movie. And this has been a fun chat. I hope people dig it too. Check out Attack of the Giant Leeches and keep listening to the Bride of Monster Kid Radio because you know Matt's going to be back.
Oh, I'll be back. You know, this is in the public domain and the movie ends with sort of a note of at least maybe one giant leech escaping and surviving. And we know that it's been remade. We know that there's been a stage play, but anybody out there who's making their own Giant Leech movie, please let us know and share it with us. Take advantage of that.
I would love that.
Public domain. Why not?
I would love that so much. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode of Bride of Monster Kid Radio. Thank you for being here. Thanks for being part of the community by joining us over on Facebook, Reddit, Patreon, Discord, Blue Sky, pretty much every other social media outlet we're trying to get on there. Reddit, did I mention Reddit? Twitter, well, it's actually X now. And, I still think we should get a Monster Kid Radio or Bride of Monster Kid Radio Red Note presence. I know we're on TikTok and Instagram. You know what? Just type in Monster Kid Radio on the Google machine and you're going to find us. We're really hard to miss. We would love to have you be part of the community and interact with us. Drop us a line. Our email address is monsterkidradio@gmail.com, or you can call and leave us a voicemail at 360-524-2484. This is also available on our website at monsterkidradio.net, where you can learn even more about the podcast. You're going to find links to our Amazon affiliate page. It looks like an Amazon button, but it's actually the Frankenstein's monster with the big Amazon A in it. Just click on that. It's going to take you to Amazon, but it's going to be part of the Monster Kid Radio umbrella. Any shopping you do after you click on that, and then you check out, obviously, we're going to get a little bit of kickback from Jeff Bezos. I know, he's a little hard up because he just sent his fiance and a bunch of women up into space, but yeah, I think he can afford a dime or two if you were to use the Amazon affiliate link. And that would help us out here at Bride of Monster Kid Radio. We are on Patreon at patreon.com/Monster Kid Radio, where you could become a patron and actually support the show that way, or just follow the show without kicking in any money. I mean, we are going to start posting everything there as well. And I do have a new episode of The House of Monster Kid Radio in production right now, which is a patron exclusive over at patreon.com/Monster Kid Radio. So check us out over there. We don't get a lot of action over on Reddit, but if you are a Redditor, we'd love to see talk about your favorite podcast called Bride of Monster Kid Radio. I think there's only one called Bride of Monster Kid Radio. Hopefully we are your favorite, if there is more than one. Okay, what's coming up next week on the show? Well, normally in the show notes, I do mention that, but I'm not 100% sure right now. You might have noticed there's been a distinct lack of Beth in this episode of the podcast, and that's because she had to go out of town again, which is why she wasn't on the show this week, which is why I recorded an episode with my old buddy Matt. And I'm going to be recording an episode with somebody else for next week's episode of the podcast. I have a few possibilities. I've got a few people that I've been reaching out to and talking about setting up some things, scheduling-wise, making calendars meet, and all of that other stuff. I actually have somebody that I started talking to, and I kid you not, a decade ago about being on the show. Over 10 years ago, I reached out to this guy, somebody who is an author and a scholar that I look up to and absolutely respect. I really enjoy his work. And I was like, hey, would you like to be on the show? And he was all for it. And I said, cool, I'll get back to you. And then I never did, because 10 years ago, I don't know what I was doing, but I wasn't paying attention to the time. And then I thought to reach out to him. Hey, I never reached out to this guy before. Let's get him on the show. And then I realized when I looked at the Facebook conversation what had happened. And, well, that was my opening. That was the way I opened the conversation. It's like, hey, man, I know it's been a decade, but do you still want to do the show? And he was all in. So now we just got to figure out a way to make that work without waiting another decade to do that. So that might be what's coming up next week on the show. I know I've been intentionally vague because it's not a done deal yet, but keep your fingers and tentacles crossed. We're going to make something work. Speaking of things that are coming up in the future on Monster Kid Radio, in a couple of weeks, we're going to be in the throes of the 5th month of the year. What month is that? That's May. And we have a semi-tradition here on the show where we talk about luchador movies during the month of May. It's Lucha de Mayo. Mayo? I did it again. I always mix it up. Lucha de Mayo. Lucha de Mayo, where we talk about luchador movies during the month of May. And I've already got some feelers out to some folks who have been on the show in the past to talk about luchador movies. Going to bring them back. It's going to be a good time because I love me a good luchador movie. Big time. And then what happens after May? Well, June. And then after that comes July. And July. We're going to be talking about kaiju movies in the month of July, exclusively here on the Bride of Monster Kid Radio. We're going to give Beth an opportunity to play catch up a little bit with some of the kaiju movies that she's been catching up with. But Matt's going to be back during that time as well to talk about a movie that I've never seen before that he just recently saw. I'm excited. I'm really thrilled about what the future of the podcast looks like. Make sure you subscribe to the show in your favorite podcatcher and maybe even over on YouTube so you can stay up to date with everything happening here on the show. Bride of Monster Kid Radio is a Team Death production. All original content of Bride of Monster Kid Radio is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 Unported license. You can learn more about Team Death, our other projects like Death Designs, Mail Order Zombie, the Team Death YouTube channel, and more at www.teamdeath.com. Remember, death is spelled D-E-T-H. All previous episodes of this podcast, as well as the original Monster Kid Radio podcast, are available at www.monsterkidradio.net. Please rate and review Bride of Monster Kid Radio wherever you download your favorite podcasts. The Prowler is copyright 2025. The Kaw Tikis. You can find this on their album Amerikawna over at kawtikis.bandcamp.com. And to remind you, this is spelled KAWTIKIS.bandcamp.com, or follow the link in the show notes. Also, remember, they've got that CD release party happening at Lucia, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. Well, I know I'm mispronouncing it. It can only be pronounced one way. And this is in Lawrence, Kansas, happening on May 3rd. The CD release party happens at 4 p.m., and then they're actually going to be playing a set at 8:30 p.m. If you happen to go or you check out their digital album, let them know that you heard about them here on Bride of Monster Kid Radio. My name's Derek M. Cook. Talk to everybody next week, and make sure you pay attention to us on social media where we announce what we're going to talk about next week. Ciao.